Hi, I'm Glenn Rogers, and this is Biblical Insights. The title of our video today is How Much Power Does Jesus Have? This is part 36 of our study of Jesus' life and ministry based on the Gospel of Mark. And our text today is from Mark chapter 8, verses 22 through 26. So let's read that section of Scripture and see what Mark has to tell us. We'll be reading, as we always do, from the Simplified New Testament, which happens to be my translation of the New Testament. Mark says, "While Jesus and his followers were at Bethsaida, people brought a blind man to Jesus, begging him to touch the man and heal him. Jesus took the man and led him outside the village. He spit on the man's eyes and put his hands over them. Then he asked, 'Do you see anything?' 'I see something,' the man said. 'People, perhaps, but they look like trees moving about.' Jesus put his hands over the man's eyes again, and when he took them away, the man could see perfectly. Jesus said to him, 'Go home. Do not go back into the village right now.'" Now, this seems to me like kind of an odd story. Not because the story itself is problematic. I mean, Jesus gave sight to several blind people during his ministry. He healed all sorts of sicknesses. He helped deaf people to hear, blind people to see, crippled people to walk. He raised the dead and did a number of other kind of very impressive miracles as well. So it's not that there's a miracle here that makes this text seem odd to me. But what seems odd to me is the way Jesus went about doing this. He spit on the man's eyes and then put his hands over the man's eyes. We don't, probably something kind of like this, maybe put his hands, or maybe just one hand over his eye. We don't know what he did exactly, but it says he spit on the man's eyes and then put his hands over them, took his hands away and said, "What do you see? Can you see anything?" And the guy says, "Yeah, I see something. I guess they're people, but they look like trees moving around." Now, what that tells me is the guy hadn't been blind all his life, because if he had, he wouldn't know what people looked like. He wouldn't know what trees looked like. He wouldn't have said that it looks like people, or it might be people, but they look like trees moving around. Because he would have had no frame of reference for that if he had been blind all his life. So maybe there was an accident where he lost his eyesight, or maybe a sickness. There are lots of illnesses that cause blindness. So for some reason, the man could no longer see. Jesus was healing the man. He said, "I see people, but they look like trees moving around." So Jesus put his hands over the man's eyes again, and when he took them away, then the man could see. It sounds almost like Jesus is moderating the amount of power that he utilizes to give the man his sight. And he doesn't want to use too much power. Maybe too much power would actually damage the man's eyes further. I don't know. This is just speculation. Why did Jesus do it the way he did? It seems odd. I don't know why he did it that way. I really don't. No one does. Jesus did some odd things. One time he spit on the ground and made some mud and put that on a guy's eyes. Okay, well, what? There was nothing magical or about Jesus' saliva. Why would he have done that? I have no idea. I don't know. And neither does anybody else. So anybody who says, "Oh, well, Jesus was doing it," okay, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just making stuff up. Okay? Because nobody knows why Jesus chose to do this way. But that really isn't the point. And if you get hung up on trying to figure out why Jesus did it the way he did it, okay, you're missing the point. Mark didn't tell this story to generate discussion about Jesus' methodology. He didn't do that. The point was Jesus had the power to heal this man, and he did. Now, his methodology may have been unorthodox. We may have said, well, that's kind of a goofy way to heal somebody, but spitting on their eyes, because people who are from the West and who have some scientific background and knowledge, understand about how medicine works and things like that, they know that it didn't have anything to do with Jesus' saliva. He was a normal person in that regard with normal saliva. Okay, it helped the digestive process, didn't have any kind of magical power or anything like that. Okay, all right, so the point is not to get focused on why Jesus did what he did, the way he did it. The point is he did it. And my question, and that's why I asked this question, is how much power does Jesus have? Well, he had the power to turn water to wine. That's in John chapter 2. He had the power to walk on water. He had the power to speak to the winds and the waves and calm them. So he had power to control nature. Right? He had power to help crippled people walk and deaf people hear and speak and blind people see. He had the power to raise the dead. He had power over life and death. How much power did Jesus have? He has all he needs. He has enough power to do anything you need him to do. The actual answer to the question is how much power does Jesus have, is that he has all the power there is. God, and Jesus is God living as a human being, right? God can do anything that can be done. If it can be done, God can do it. And Jesus, as God in the flesh, had the power to do anything that needed doing. And he still has that much power. Now, when Paul was talking about this to the believers in Ephesus, he said that God has more power than we're able to comprehend. And he says it's so much more power that it's incomprehensible. We cannot understand how much power God has. That's in Ephesians chapter 3, right down around verse 20. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that there's no point in trying to figure it out, because we simply cannot understand it. There are some things that are simply beyond human comprehension. That is, with our finite human minds. We simply can't understand how powerful God is. Okay, so there's no point in worrying with it and trying to understand it. We can't. What we can do is say, okay, he has the power to do anything that he wants to do, anything that needs to be done, he has the power to do it. Now, what that means for me is if I have problems and issues and concerns in my life, and I do, just like you do, right? We all do. God has the power to deal with it. Jesus has the power to deal with it. There isn't anything beyond the ability of God to do, right? If it can be done. Now, some people argue God can do anything. Well, not really, because there are some things that by definition simply can't be done. And I don't want to get bogged down into this too much, but for instance, God can't make a square with only 3 sides, because the square by definition has 4 sides. Okay, if God makes a square and then takes away one of the sides, then it's not a square any longer. You can't make a 3-sided square. It's not possible. You can't make a round triangle. That's not possible. Some things are just not possible. You can't make a married bachelor. See, that's not possible. But anything that can be done, God can do. And we need to believe that. We need to understand that and believe that. And that was part of what Jesus was doing when he was here in his ministry. He was demonstrating that anything that needs to be done, he can do. So any problem you have that needs to be solved, he can solve it. Now, some of the times, what God does is he says, I'm not going to take away this problem because you need this problem. This problem is important for you. This problem is helping you. So I'm not going to take the problem away, but I will help you deal with it. He did this to the Apostle Paul, right? After Paul was caught up to the third heaven and saw all sorts of things he couldn't even talk about, God gave him what he described as a thorn in the flesh, right? And he prayed, he said, take it away, God. He prayed 3 times, please take it away. God said, no, Paul, I'm not going to take it away. You need it. You need it. So it's going to stay. But I will help you with it. I will help you deal with it. Sometimes that's what God does. That's how he answers a prayer. I won't take away the problem, but I will give you the strength to deal with it, to cope with it. Okay? But he has the power to do that. He has the power to do what can be done in your life. And that's an important lesson for us to learn. Sometimes we get to thinking, oh, there's no way this can be fixed. There's just nothing that can be done here. Well, it may not be anything you can do, but there's plenty that God can do. And the hard part is for us to learn to accept God's decision about how he's going to help you with your problem. But he has the power, and he can help you. Sometimes, like with this man, the resolution to a problem comes in stages. Jesus touched a man's eyes, spit on them, touched the man's eyes, put his hands over him, and then took him down. Now, can you see now? Well, the man could see a little bit, but he couldn't see clearly yet. And so Jesus did it again. It took time. It was a process. And sometimes when God helps us with our problems, it doesn't just happen overnight, immediately. It's a process. And so we have to learn to deal with that. We have to learn to accept God's judgment. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. I don't think I've ever sneezed on camera before. Anyway, we have to learn to accept God's judgment in the matter and allow him to help us the way he wants to help us. He knows what's best, and he can do what's best, and we simply have to have faith. Do you have faith to let God help you with your problems? You have to pray, you have to be patient, and you have to let God help you, and you have to be willing to accept the help that he's giving, the help that he's offering. But when you do, he's there. He'll never leave you, never forsake you. He'll always help you. So, as you think about these things, as you're going about your daily life, as always, my advice is read your Bible, pray, go to church, and may God bless.